In the news tonight, His Majesty the King heads to Mexico on an official visit upon an invitation by President Enrique Pena Nieto, and then to a working visit to the U.S. for a summit meeting with the U.S. President. A deadly day in Iraq as rockets hit Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone, and car bombs elsewhere in the capital leave at least 11 people dead. And Al Nashama book a spot in next year's Asian Cup tournament in Australia after crushing Singapore 3-1. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. His Majesty the King headed to Mexico on an official visit upon an invitation by President Enrique Pena Nieto. The King will discuss with the Mexican President and several political and economic leaders ways to strengthen relations in various fields, in addition to Middle East and global issues. From Mexico, the King will head to the United States on a working visit, during which he will hold on February 14th a summit meeting with U.S. President Barack Obama in California. Talks will focus on bilateral ties, regional developments, especially the peace process between the Palestinians and the Israelis, and efforts exerted by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry in this regard, along with developments in Syria and the wider Middle East. In addition to the summit meeting with President Obama, the King will meet in Washington, D.C. with key administration officials, U.S. congressional leaders and committee members, as well as representatives from U.S. Islamic and Jewish organizations. His Royal Highness Prince Raad bin Zayed was sworn in as regent during His Majesty's stay abroad. Prime Minister Abdullah Ansur led a ceremony to launch the World Interfaith Harmony Week, organized by the Ministry of Awqaf and Religious Affairs at the King Abdullah I Mosque. The World Interfaith Harmony Week was first proposed at the UN General Assembly in September 2010 by His Majesty the King, and was unanimously adopted in October the same year by the UN, making the first week of February as the World Interfaith Harmony Week. In his opening remarks, Awqaf Minister Hail Dawood noted that King Abdullah had launched 3 initiatives in 6 years. He said that the Amman Message, the Common Word, and the World Interfaith Harmony Week were not only political messages, but expressions of the reality of Islam, which accepts other faiths, and a reaffirmation of the Islamic values, but not a response to pressures of the actual situation. Prime Minister Abdullah Ansur discussed with Qatari Court of Cassation and Higher Judicial Council President Masoud Amiri ways to cement judicial cooperation between the two countries. Ansur emphasized the close ties between the two countries and pointed to the broad areas that exist to further enhance joint cooperation, including the exchange of judicial expertise. Amiri spoke about the strong Qatari-Jordanian relations and conveyed to the Prime Minister an invitation from his Qatari counterpart, Sheikh Abdullah bin Nasser Al Thani, to visit the Gulf Arab state. He said training, rehabilitation and openness of the judiciary are core issues when it comes to upgrading the judiciary's functions. In the latest spate of violence in Iraq, 2 rockets hit Baghdad's green zone and car bombs claimed the lives of 11 people in the capital, Baghdad. 1 soldier was killed in the rare attack on the green zone, which is home to several Western embassies, underscoring Iraq's ability to protect strategic sites as security deteriorates. The car bombs struck mostly Shiite districts, including Shurta and Abu Shair districts in the southwest of Baghdad, where 4 people were killed in a crowded market. Another car bomb in South Baghdad's Al Ma'alif neighborhood killed 2 people, and 3 others died in a blast in the Bay'a quarter. And in North Baghdad, an explosion near a police patrol claimed another life. No group immediately claimed responsibility for any of today's attacks. And over to Syria, where at least 5 people were reported killed, including children, in the northern city of Aleppo after government forces dropped crude bombs. Witnesses said a bomb was dropped on the Uthman bin Affan Mosque in the Masakin Hanano district that was used as a school for children. Government forces have been escalating an assault on Aleppo, Syria's second largest city, using a near daily barrage of barrel bombs that some activists say is forcing out residents and slowly gaining ground for the president against rebel forces weakened by weeks of infighting. And in Moscow, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held a meeting with the Syrian opposition National Coalition leader Ahmed Jarba to discuss the Syria conflict. Lavrov said Russia is working with all sides to aid the search for a solution that has been throughout the conflict and urged all parties involved to support a political settlement to the crisis. Jarba confirmed that opposition would take part in the next round of Geneva II talks in spite of the fact that even during the Geneva process, murders were continuing with the use of barrel bombs that were dropped on civilians. Russia also offered assurances that the Syrian government will show up at the next round of talks next week and will soon ship more toxic agents abroad for destruction under a deal to eliminate its chemical weapons arsenal. Egypt's foreign ministry summoned Qatar's chargé d'affaires to demand the extradition of Youssef al-Qaradawi, an Egyptian-born cleric who supports the Muslim Brotherhood. Last month, Egypt had summoned the Qatari ambassador in protest at Doha's criticism of the crackdown on Islamists. The ministry's spokesman said recent comments by Qaradawi that Saudi support for the military government was wrong and should be withdrawn were unacceptable and criticized Doha for its refusal to hand over wanted Egyptians. Qaradawi faces charges alongside ousted President Mohamed Morsi in connection with a mass jailbreak during the 2011 uprising that ousted Hosni Mubarak. The Qatari diplomat was told that it was necessary to hand over those who are wanted by Egypt.
The Qatari representative was summoned again to the Foreign Ministry headquarters to convey a message of protest and to reaffirm the need to carry out Egypt's requests and to stress the importance of responding to the Prosecutor General, Arab Interpol and International Interpol's request to deliver the wanted persons and to intervene to stop these infringements on Egypt.
Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said that any final settlement on Tehran's nuclear program must include the removal of all sanctions against Iran. Zarif's comments come a day after he announced during a visit to Germany that a final deal with world powers on Iran's nuclear program is possible within 6 months if there is goodwill, adding that he was not worried about the U.S. Congress trying to impose new sanctions. Zarif was speaking in a joint news conference with Swedish Foreign Minister Carl Bildt, who echoed his counterpart's belief that such a time frame would be possible.
If anyone talks about negotiations to go on with sanctions in place, that's not true. The result and the conclusion of the meeting should be the removal of all sanctions and set the stage for a better logical game between the players in this area. Hopefully, we will witness the same thing and experience it.
I'm convinced if there is goodwill on both sides, a deal is possible within the very ambitious timescale of 6 months. It's not going to be easy, and it requires a genuine will for compromises on both sides. But I think the benefits that are there for both sides are so obvious that everyone should focus minds on actually achieving it. Needless to say, we respect the right of Iran to a peaceful nuclear energy program. Sweden has one. But it is up to Iran in the talks to agree on the modalities to make certain that there is complete international confidence in this.
Meanwhile, a senior U.S. State Department official said the interim deal to curb Iran's nuclear program is not a perfect diplomatic agreement, but it purchased additional time to slow Tehran's ambitions of a nuclear weapon. During a congressional panel by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, some senators questioned the reason behind negotiating a deal that still allows Tehran to enrich uranium. But the chief U.S. negotiator said diplomacy should be given a chance.
We are not blind, however, to the more than 30 years of difficult history between the United States and Iran, or Iran's past actions and past behavior, as well as its current behavior. But it is crucial that we give diplomacy a chance to succeed. If Iran lives up to its commitments, then the world will become a safer place. If it does not, then we retain all options to ensure that Iran can never and will never obtain a nuclear weapon.
Microsoft Corporation named Satya Nadella as its next chief executive officer, ending a protracted search for a new leader after Steve Ballmer announced his intention to retire in August. He is only the third CEO in Microsoft's 39-year history, following co-founder Bill Gates and Ballmer. Microsoft also said John Thompson, lead independent director, would succeed Gates as chairman. Gates will assume a new role as technology advisor and retain a seat on the board. Investors and analysts are already weighing how effective Nadella will be in reigniting the company's mobile ambitions and satisfying Wall Street's hunger for cash. Still in the world of technology, today marks 10 years since Mark Zuckerberg founded Facebook from his dorm room at Harvard University. Since then, the site has grown to become a global social network with more than 1.2 billion active users. It began as a social networking site exclusive to universities, but quickly grew to become a major outpost for connection in countries all around the world. Its creation was the subject of an Academy Award-winning film, The Social Network, in 2010. The site has had its ups and downs over the past decade, from concerns over its privacy policy to combating a growing online bullying epidemic. But despite its shortcomings, there is still no other site that does as good of a job in connecting people around the world. A British artist who created a video using stop-motion animation and face paint has gone viral. Emma Allen used face paint to make her face transform from a skull to a sky full of shooting stars and even a growing embryo. She took over 750 photographs after changing her face paint each time and showed the pictures at high speed to give the impression of movement. It took her 5 days to create the piece called Ruby, with her working 17 hours a day. Jordan's Al Nashama booked a spot in next year's Asian Cup tournament in Australia after they defeated Singapore 3-1 in a match played this afternoon in Singapore. Goals from Thair Bawab, Ahmed Hayel and Yusuf Rawashde secured the qualification with 1 game left as they clinched second place behind Oman in Group A. Al Nashama made their intentions clear straight from kickoff as they effectively pressed high up the pitch. 12 teams have already qualified for the tournament, including hosts Australia, Japan, North and South Korea, Bahrain, Iran, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Oman and Uzbekistan.
بالكرة نحاول الاحتفاظ بالكرة بشكل جماعي. يوسف الرواجده ممكن الثالث. يوسف الرواجده ولا أروع ولا أهدى.
After being plunged to the bottom of the world's deepest lake and hauled to the top of Europe's highest mountain, the Sochi Olympic torch will finally arrive in the Black Sea resort of Sochi tomorrow. The torch traveled across multiple time zones and even went all the way to the International Space Station in its 4-month, 65,000-kilometer relay, the longest in the Olympic history. And just days before the official opening of the Games, Olympic organizers are still struggling with getting hotels ready. 41,000 hotel rooms are being provided for the Games, and so far there are around 700 rooms not ready for the guests. And finally, cold and partly cloudy weather tonight with a chance for rain, especially in the eastern regions. Frost formation is also expected after midnight in most parts of the kingdom. As for tomorrow, cold conditions prevail in most parts of the country, while winds will be northeasterly moderate. Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, it will be relatively cold tonight, but fair tomorrow, while winds will be northerly moderate to brisk and the seas slightly choppy. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, here's a reminder of the day's top stories. His Majesty the King heads to Mexico on an official visit upon an invitation by President Enrique Peña Nieto, and then to a working visit to the United States for a summit meeting with the U.S. President. A deadly day in Iraq as rockets hit Baghdad's heavily fortified green zone, and car bombs elsewhere in the capital leave at least 11 people dead. And Al Nashama book a spot in next year's Asian Cup tournament in Australia after crushing Singapore 3-1. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tukhan. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.